That morning, Carson woke up at 6:30 a.m., just like always. This 65-year-old American, who had taught mathematics for 40 years, maintained his routine even after retirement. But as he sipped his coffee and opened the newspaper, he didn't yet know he would have to solve the biggest equation of his life. Because the phone in his pocket was about to ring, and that call would change everything. Carson Allen stood in the kitchen of his small house in Columbus, Ohio, drinking his coffee prepared with typical American precision. Outside, the cold October wind gently rattled the windows while he enjoyed the warm, orderly life inside. "Good morning, honey," said his wife Anjali as she entered the kitchen. 42 years of marriage had made them experts at sensing each other's presence. "Good morning, sweetheart," Carson replied and smiled. "Today is Tyler's and Sophia's game, don't forget." Oh, his grandchildren. Carson's eyes lit up. They would go to 12-year-old Tyler's football game and 9-year-old Sophia's piano recital. The youngest, Emma, was only 7 years old and loved listening to Grandpa's math stories. "Of course, how could I forget?" Anjali smiled. "You were also going to show Emma that new geometry game." Carson nodded. It had been 2 years since his retirement, but he couldn't give up teaching. Now he taught mathematics to his grandchildren just as he had done for thousands of students for 40 years. But something was different that morning. As Carson finished his coffee, he felt again the strange sensation he had noticed in recent weeks. He was having trouble feeling the urge to urinate, waking up frequently at night. Just old age, he always thought. But the real pain hadn't started yet. When the phone rang, Carson had solved half of the Sudoku puzzle in his newspaper. The display showed Dr. Fogel, family doctor. "Good morning, Carson." The doctor's voice sounded unusually serious. "We need to talk about your test results from last week." Carson's heart seemed to stop for a moment. "Is there a problem?" "Could you come to my office today, as early as possible?" When the phone hung up, Carson met Anjali's worried looks. In 42 years of marriage, they both knew how bad news comes. "Everything's fine," Carson said, but the tremor in his voice didn't escape his wife. At that moment, something changed, and Carson didn't yet know this was just the beginning.
In the waiting room of Dr. Fogel's practice, Carson tried to read his mathematics magazine, but the letters danced before his eyes. Formulas became meaningless symbols. "Carson Allen?" When the nurse called, it took seconds for him to stand up. Dr. Fogel had known Carson for 15 years. He was a serious but compassionate doctor, just like Carson had been a serious but compassionate teacher. "Please sit down," said the doctor, placing the file on the desk. Carson sat down and kept his back straight. This was a habit from his teaching years. In difficult situations, stand upright, stay calm. "Your PSA levels are above the normal range." Dr. Fogel opened the file. "They should be at 4.2 ng per milliliter. Yours are at 8.7. Carson was a math teacher. He understood numbers, but he couldn't quite grasp what these numbers meant. "What does this mean?" he asked, his voice coming out calmer than expected. "There's a problem with the prostate. For a definitive diagnosis, we need to do a biopsy." That word hung in the air. Biopsy. Carson had taught his students for 40 years, every problem has a solution, you just need to find the right approach. But now he was facing a problem himself and couldn't see the solution. "When's the biopsy?" he asked. "I can give you an appointment this week." "Carson," Dr. Fogel paused for a moment. "Elevated PSA doesn't always mean cancer. It could also be an infection or benign enlargement." But Carson had noticed that look in the doctor's eyes. After 40 years of teaching, he could understand what people really thought. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. When he returned home, Anjali was preparing food in the kitchen. When she heard Carson's voice, she turned around and understood everything from his facial expression. What did the doctor say? Carson approached and took Anjali's hands. These hands had held his hands for 42 years. These hands had raised their 3 children, loved their grandchildren. I need to go for tests, he said simply. Anjali nodded. She couldn't find words to speak, but she squeezed Carson's shoulder. And some moments, words are insufficient. Only touch is enough. When the grandchildren came that evening, Carson was like always. Tyler told about the football game. Sophia played her piano piece. Little Emma asked Grandpa for a math story. Once upon a time, there was a very important equation, Carson began, taking Emma on his lap. This equation was so difficult that even the smartest mathematicians couldn't solve it. What happened then, Grandpa? Emma's eyes lit up. Then a little girl came and said, maybe we can solve this equation by approaching it differently. And did she solve it? Carson stroked his granddaughter's hair. Of course she solved it, because every problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need to look at it from different angles. Emma clapped happily, but Carson was also thinking about his own situation while telling the story. He was trying to look at his own equation from different angles, but the real story was just beginning. On the day of the biopsy, Carson woke up early as always. But that morning, he didn't drink coffee, didn't read the newspaper. He would go to the hospital. When Anjali dropped him off, she said, I'll be here. Everything will go well. Carson nodded, but he couldn't hide the growing anxiety inside him. At 65 years old, he was truly afraid for the first time in his life. The procedure went faster than he thought, but the waiting was torture. The results will be ready in a week, the doctor said. 1 week, 168 hours, 10,080 minutes. Carson was a math teacher. Breaking time down into numbers gave him peace. But this time, even numbers didn't help. During that week, he tried to continue life normally. He went for walks with Anjali, played with his grandchildren, read books. But a corner of his mind was always waiting for those results. Wait a minute, don't miss this detail. On the 3rd day, little Emma came and said, Grandpa, you look sad today. Carson was surprised. Children are always the most honest observers. Sometimes grown-ups get sad too, Emma, Carson said. When I'm sad, Mom hugs me and tells me everything will be better. Emma hugged her grandfather. Those little arms melted the coldness in Carson's heart a little. You hug me too, Grandpa. Maybe it will get better. Carson hugged his granddaughter tightly. At that moment, he understood. He had to fight this battle not just for himself, but for this little angel too. You won't believe this, but on the 6th day, the phone rang. Carson, this is Dr. Fogel. Come to my office to discuss the results. Can't you say it over the phone? Silence. Please come to my office. When Carson hung up the phone, his hands were shaking. Anjali came running from the kitchen. Who was calling? Dr. Fogel, the results are ready. Anjali's face turned pale. They both knew. Good news is also said over the phone.
In Dr. Fogel's office, Carson and Anjali sat facing each other. The doctor opened the file and adjusted his glasses. Carson, the biopsy results came back positive. That word hung in the air. Positive. Most of his life, the word positive meant something good. But in that room, at that moment, It was the worst word in the world. Prostate cancer, Dr. Fogel continued. Gleason score 7, which means intermediate risk. Anjali's breath caught. She gripped Carson's hand. What are my chances? Carson's voice came out calm, a habit from his teaching years. Stay calm in crises. We caught it early. We have treatment options: surgery, radiation therapy, hormone therapy. The doctor continued talking, but Carson was hearing the words only halfway. His mind was on his grandchildren. Tyler's football games, Sophia's piano recitals, Emma's math stories. "How much time do I have?" he asked. "Carson, this isn't a death sentence. With the right treatment, you can live a normal life." But Carson had seen the truth in his eyes. Normal life. Nothing would ever be the same again. Just when everything was going well. At home, Anjali couldn't hold back her tears. The man she had been with for 42 years was sick, very sick. "What will we tell the children?" she asked. Carson looked out the window. In the garden, autumn leaves were falling, but when spring came, new leaves would sprout. That's how nature worked, death and rebirth. "We'll tell the truth," he said, "but we won't scare them." That evening they called their 3 children, Mike, Jenny, and Dave. Carson's children had now started their own families, were adults raising their own children. "Dad, you're strong. You'll win this fight too. We'll do everything to help you," Jenny said. Dave was crying silently. He was the youngest child, and the fear of losing his father affected him the most. When he closed his eyes, he thought of only one thing. That night, Carson couldn't sleep. Anjali was breathing calmly beside him, but Carson was staring at the ceiling. He was 65 years old. If he was lucky, maybe he could live another 10, 15 years. Emma would be 22 then. She would graduate from university, maybe get married, maybe have children. Carson wanted so much to see those children. But what if he couldn't?
The next week, Carson's life changed completely. Doctor appointments, test results, treatment options. Everything was so technical, so medical. Urologist Dr. Hardy explained the options one by one. Radical prostatectomy, meaning complete removal of the prostate. There can be side effects: urinary incontinence, sexual dysfunction. When Carson heard these words, a coldness settled inside him. He was 65 years old, but still felt young. These side effects. "There's the radiation therapy option," the doctor continued. 6 to 8 weeks of daily sessions, fewer side effects, but takes longer to show effectiveness. "Which do you recommend?" Carson asked. "We need to decide considering your age, general health condition, and personal preferences." Personal preferences? Carson's preference was not to get sick at all, but that option no longer existed. At that moment, something changed. At home, when talking with Anjali, Carson said, "I'm choosing surgery." But the side effects? "Anjali, for 40 years I taught my students this: when you face difficult problems, choose the most direct solution. Don't run away, don't postpone, just go at it." Anjali nodded. She knew her husband. Once Carson made a decision, there was no going back. When the grandchildren came to visit that evening, Carson decided to explain the situation to them. "Kids, I have something to tell you," he said, sitting all 3 next to him. "Grandpa has a small problem in his body. The doctors will solve it, but Grandpa needs some time for this." Tyler, being 12 years old, could ask more serious questions. "Grandpa, are you going to die?" Carson looked into his grandson's eyes. In those eyes there was fear, worry, love. "Tyler, none of us can live forever, but I'm very strong right now, and I'm going to fight this problem. I'll fight for you." Emma came closer and took Grandpa's hand. "Grandpa, you always solved math problems. you'll solve this problem too." Carson's eyes filled with tears. How much he was learning from this little angel. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. The surgery date was set, November 15th, exactly 2 weeks later. Carson lived those 2 weeks as if they were the last opportunity. He took long walks with Anjali, spent more time with his children and grandchildren, visited old students. One of his former students, Stephen, who was now a doctor, came to visit. "Mr. Allen, I owe you so much. Your mathematics teaching in high school changed my life." "You created your own success yourself, Stephen." "No, you taught me the most important thing, that every problem has a solution. Now I apply this philosophy to patients." Carson smiled. This was the most beautiful aspect of his teaching years, being able to touch people's lives. On the morning of November 15th, Carson woke up at 5:30 a.m. He had to be at the hospital at 7 a.m. Anjali had prepared breakfast, but Carson couldn't eat. He felt the strange emptiness in his stomach. "Are you afraid?" Anjali asked. Carson thought. "Yes," he said honestly. "But fear is sometimes a good thing. It forces you to be careful." On the way to the hospital, the car was silent. Carson watched the Columbus streets through the window. Everything was normal. People going to work, children walking to school. Life was continuing. But his life could change completely today. At the hospital, the whole family had gathered. Mike, Jenny, Dave, and their spouses. The grandchildren were at school, but Carson knew they were thinking of him. Dr. Hardy conducted the final pre-surgery consultation. "Carson, everything is ready. The surgery will take about 3 to 4 hours. We'll completely remove the prostate and check the surrounding lymph nodes." "What are the chances of success?" "At your age and at this stage, we have a 95% success rate." 95%. Carson was a math teacher. He knew this was a good rate, but there was also a 5% risk. Just when they were losing hope, there was a knock at the door. When the nurse took him to surgery, Carson looked at Anjali one last time. "I love you." "I love you too. I'll be waiting for your return." On the operating table, before anesthesia was administered, Carson thought of one last thing. Emma's math stories, Tyler's football games, Sophia's piano concerts. He would live for these. When Carson opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the white lights on the ceiling. Then Anjali's face appeared. "How do you feel?" Anjali's voice trembled. Carson tried to speak, but his throat was dry. The nurse gave him some water. "The surgery, how did it go?" "It went very well." Dr. Hardy appeared next to him. "We completely removed the prostate. The lymph nodes were clean. The cancer hadn't spread." Carson closed his eyes. "Thank God." "But the recovery will be long," the doctor continued. "You need to be careful for 6 to 8 weeks." The next days passed in a blur. Pain, medications, visitors. His children came every day. Mike had taken time off work for his father. Jenny brought cooked food. Dave silently held his hand. And at that very moment, the phone rang. On the third day, the grandchildren came. When Carson saw them, his face brightened. "Grandpa, how was your surgery?" Emma asked innocently. "The doctors fixed me, just like they fix a broken machine." "Are you better now?" "I'm better now, but I need some more time to heal completely." Tyler came closer. "Grandpa, when I grow up, I'll be a doctor too. I'll treat patients like this." Carson's eyes filled with tears. How much this little child had been affected by what they had gone through. "That's a great idea, Tyler. You'll be a wonderful doctor." Sophia had brought her piano back. "Grandpa, should I play you a piece?"
My teacher says music heals. Of course, sweetheart. I'd love to hear it. Sophia took out a small keyboard and began playing a piece by Mozart. The sound of the music filled the room, the corridor, and even Carson's soul. A week later, Carson was able to return home. Angeli had prepared everything: extra pillows in the bedroom, special foods in the kitchen, support bars in the bathroom. "You've overdone it a bit," Carson laughed. "You're too precious to me. Overdoing it is my right." The first days were hard. Carson was an independent person, and he found it hard to need help. Simple things were exhausting: bathing, climbing stairs, tying his own shoes. But slowly he was getting stronger. But the real pain— 2 weeks later, Carson began experiencing side effects. He was having urinary control problems, and this situation embarrassed him greatly. "This is temporary," Dr. Hardy said, "but it can last 2 to 3 months." Carson was 65 years old, but still felt strong. Now even the most basic bodily functions were becoming problems. Angeli said nothing, but Carson knew it was hard for her. 42 years of marriage had taught them to share everything. "Maybe you should rest a bit," Carson said one evening. "Where would I go? My place is here, by your side." Carson understood once again how lucky he was with his wife. Wait a minute, don't miss this detail. In the 3rd week, when Emma came to visit, she noticed that her grandfather was a bit sad. "Grandpa, you look sad again." Carson was surprised. This little girl knew him very well. "Sometimes healing can be difficult, Emma." "But you told me every problem has a solution." Carson smiled. His own words were coming back to him. "You're right. This problem will be solved too." "Can I help you?" "You're helping enough just by being here." Emma hugged her grandfather. "I love you so much, Grandpa. You're the best grandpa." Carson hugged his granddaughter tightly. The strength he got from this little angel was more effective than all medications. In the 4th week, Carson began taking short walks. On the first day, he just walked around the house once. On the second day, he went out to the garden. On the 3rd day, he walked to the end of the street. Every step was a victory. Angeli walked beside him, adapting to Carson's pace. "You know," Carson said one day, "this illness taught me a lot." "Like what?" "Not to take anything for granted, that every day is valuable, how important health is." "You already knew these things." "I knew them, but I wasn't living them. Now every morning of waking up feels like a gift." Angeli squeezed her husband's hand. "It feels that way to me, too." At that moment, something changed. In the 5th week, he managed to go to Tyler's football game. Sitting in the stands and watching his grandson was great happiness for Carson. When Tyler scored a touchdown, Carson stood up and clapped. At that moment, he forgot all the hospital days, all the difficulties. After the game, Tyler ran to his grandfather. "Did you see, Grandpa? I scored a touchdown for you." "I saw, sweetheart. It was magnificent." Tyler hugged his grandfather. Carson absorbed that warmth. He lived for these moments. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. In the 6th week, he attended Sophia's piano recital. When the little girl played Mozart on stage, tears ran down Carson's cheeks. When the music ended, he stood up and applauded. Sophia searched for her father, her mother, but especially her grandfather with her eyes from the stage. When she saw Carson, she smiled brightly. "That smile is worth everything," Carson whispered to Angeli.
2 months later, Carson went to his first control appointment, PSA test, ultrasound examination. While Dr. Hardy examined the results, Carson could hear his heartbeat. "Carson, I have great news," the doctor smiled. "Your PSA level is below 0.1. This is a perfect result." Carson breathed a sigh of relief. He grabbed Angeli's hand.
Does this mean the cancer won't come back? I can't give an absolute guarantee, but currently there are no detectable cancer cells in your body. If it stays like this for 5 years, you'll be considered completely cured. 5 years. Carson did the math. Then he'd be 70 years old. Emma would be 12, Tyler 17, Sophia 14 years old. He could see them all. Just when everything was going well. When they returned home, Anjali was crying with joy. "We did it, Carson, we did it!" Yes, we did it. That evening, they called the whole family and announced the good news. Mike, Jenny, Dave, everyone was very happy. When the grandchildren came, Carson gave them the good news. "Kids, the doctor said Grandpa is healing completely." Emma clapped. Tyler shouted, "Hooray!" Sophia hugged her grandfather. "You'll never get sick again, will you, Grandpa?" Emma asked. Carson thought, how should he explain to this little girl? Life is full of uncertainties. There are no guarantees. "Emma, none of us can know the future. But I know this. I'm very healthy right now, and I plan to spend many years with you." Emma nodded satisfactorily. This explanation was enough for her.
3 months later, Carson had completely returned to his old routine. He woke up early every morning, went for walks, spent time with his grandchildren. But something had changed. He was now aware of every moment. While drinking coffee, he smelled more. While talking with Anjali, he listened to her voice more carefully. While playing with his grandchildren, he was etching every minute into his mind. "You seem more alive somehow," Anjali said one day. "When you face death, you understand how valuable life is." Carson was now also communicating with other cancer patients. Dr. Hardy had introduced him to other patients. A man named Chris, 58 years old, an engineer, was receiving prostate cancer treatment like Carson. "I'm scared," Chris told him. "What if I don't heal?" Carson told him Emma's math story. "You know, Chris, I have a 7-year-old granddaughter. She taught me this. Every problem has a solution. You just need to look at it from different angles." "But cancer is also a problem. And today, we have the technology, the doctors, to solve this problem. Would you rather get sick 40 years ago or now?" Chris smiled. "Of course now." "Exactly. You caught this disease at the right time."
But the real pain hadn't started yet. After Carson recovered, he made a decision. He would share his experience with others. He decided to give a talk at his old school, Franklin High School. In the school where he had taught mathematics for 40 years, he would now give a life lesson. "Dear students," Carson stood at the microphone, "I taught you mathematics for 40 years. Today, I want to give you a more important lesson." The class listened silently. Most of these students didn't know Carson, but there was a respectful silence. "Last year I got cancer," Carson began with a simple sentence. "I'm 65 years old, and I face death." There was a slight movement among the students. "But you know, for 40 years I taught you this. Every problem has a solution. Cancer was also a problem, and I solved it." Carson looked at the class. Young faces, hopeful eyes. "My request from you, value every day of your life. Love your family, embrace your friends, pursue your dreams, because nothing is guaranteed." When the talk ended, applause rose. But the real reward for Carson was when a student approached. "Mr. Allen, my grandfather is also a cancer patient. Your talk will give him hope." Carson shook the young man's hand. This is what he lived for. Wait a minute. Don't miss this detail. A year later, Carson was again at a control appointment. This time, not only Anjali, but also his 3 grandchildren were with him.
Grandpa, the doctor will say good things, won't he? Emma asked. I hope so, sweetheart. When Dr. Hardy announced the test results, everyone's face was smiling. Carson, your PSA level is still so low, it's undetectable. I can consider you completely healed. Emma clapped. Tyler shouted, hooray! Sophia hugged her grandfather. What does this mean, doctor? Carson asked. This means the probability of your cancer returning is very, very low. You won the fight. Carson closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had fought and won. You won't believe this, but that evening, the whole family organized a celebration dinner for Carson. Mike, Jenny, Dave and their families, the grandchildren, old friends. Carson stood up and said he wanted to speak. My dear family, dear friends, he began. A year ago, I didn't know if I would be at this table. Silence fell over the table. But here I am. I didn't just survive, I became stronger. Carson looked at Angeli. I thank my wife, who has been by my side for 42 years. She never let go of my hand in the most difficult days. Then he turned to his children. I thank my children. Their love gave me strength. Finally, he looked at his grandchildren. And I thank you, my dear grandchildren. Your laughter gave me a reason to live. Carson didn't raise his voice, but everyone heard him. This illness taught me, life is like a mathematical problem. It can look difficult, be frightening, but there's always a solution. You just need to find the right approach. Emma stood up and started clapping. Then everyone stood up. Carson felt happier at that moment, at 66 years old, than he ever had before.
2 years later, Carson's story was published in the local newspaper. The headline read, 65-year-old cancer patient teacher, every problem has a solution. After the article was published, Carson received dozens of letters. Cancer patients, their families, people who had lost hope. One letter particularly moved Carson. Dear Mr. Carson, I am Thomas, 42 years old, and although I don't know you, I wanted to write after reading your article. I was also diagnosed with prostate cancer and am very scared. I have 2 small children, 8 and 5 years old. Your story gave me hope. Maybe I can win this fight too. Maybe I can see my grandchildren like you. Thank you. You saved a life without knowing it. When Carson read the letter, his eyes filled with tears. His own struggle was now not just for himself, but also a beacon of hope for others. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. 3 years later, Carson's youngest granddaughter Emma turned 10 and asked him a very special question. Grandpa, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. Why, sweetheart? Because I want to heal patients like you. You taught me every problem has a solution. Carson looked at his granddaughter. This little girl had witnessed his illness process, seen that her grandfather was strong, and now wanted to help others. Emma, you'll be a wonderful doctor because you have the most important thing, empathy. What's empathy, Grandpa? Feeling other people's pain, wanting to help them. Emma thought, when you were sick, I was very sad. I don't want other children to be sad. Carson took his granddaughter on his lap. This is what he had fought for these moments, for this future. And at that very moment, the phone rang. The voice on the phone sounded familiar, but Carson couldn't remember exactly. Mr. Allen, this is Dr. Stephen Weber. I told you I'm your former student. Do you remember? Of course, Stephen. How are you? Very well, sir. Actually, I'm calling you to tell you something. Last week, I had a patient, 67 years old, prostate cancer. He was very hopeless. Carson listened. I told him your story, how you fought and won. The man changed completely. Now he's starting his treatment and is very hopeful.
Carson smiled. That makes me very happy, Stephen. Sir, I don't know if you're aware, but not just my patient. In the oncology department in Columbus, there's no doctor who doesn't know your story. We show you as an example to patients. Carson was surprised. He didn't know his small battle had such a big impact. Thank you, Stephen. This means a lot to me. No, sir, I should thank you. You taught me not just mathematics, but life, too. After the phone call, Carson turned to Anjali. You know, maybe getting cancer was a blessing. What do you mean? If I hadn't gotten sick, could I ever have touched so many people? Now I'm not just a math teacher, I've become someone who gives hope. Anjali took her husband's hand. You were always someone who gave hope. Now more people just see it.
Today, Carson Allen is 69 years old. Since he received the cancer diagnosis 4 years ago, his life has completely changed. Emma is now 11 years old and really studying to attend medical school. Tyler is 16 years old and very successful in football. But more importantly, he's become an empathetic young man. Sophia is 13 years old and still plays piano, but now also gives concerts in hospitals. Carson's story became a source of hope, not just for his family, but for hundreds of people. The lectures he gives to cancer patients, the letters he writes, the support group he founded. A math teacher's fight against cancer became a life philosophy. Every problem has a solution. Just when everything was going well, last month when Carson returned from his latest control appointment, Dr. Hardy told him, "Carson, I now consider you a completely healthy person. Cancer is your past." Carson understood at that moment. Cancer hadn't defeated him. He had defeated cancer. But more importantly, the biggest victory he had achieved in this process was healing not himself, but others. When he came home, Emma greeted him. "Grandpa, what did the doctor say?" "I'm completely healthy now, Emma." "So you'll never get sick?" Carson looked at his granddaughter. He now knew how to answer her. "Emma, none of us can know the future, but I know this. Whatever happens, every problem has a solution. And you'll find the solution to your own problems too." Emma smiled and hugged her grandfather. Carson felt in that hug that his entire fight had been worth it.